Corporate finance practice problem using Excel. Common stock value calculation. So we will calculate the value of the common stock using multiple methods. Get ready. It's time to take your chance with corporate finance. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet, would like to follow along, note that we are in the practice tab as opposed to the example tab. The example tab in essence being an answer key. We have our information on the left-hand side. We will use that to populate the blue area on the right-hand side. We're looking at the common stocks. Note, when thinking about the common stocks, there's a couple things that we have to take into consideration with relation to the value of the stock. One being the dividends, the returns that are going to be the direct returns, and two, the valuation of the stock. Does the stock increase or decrease in value? Now, there's a couple different ways that we kind of think about how we can consider or estimate the value of the stock. One way we might be able to consider it is we might say, hey, look, let's project out into the future what the amount of the dividends will be, and then let's project out into the future what the price of the stock will be at some point into the future, and then take those amounts, present value them back to the current point, and that can be one way that we can basically try to get to the value of the stock. The other way is the method that we've taken a look at before, which will get us to a similar kind of process. And so we'll do both of those methods and compare, contrast the two. So let's start off with this idea of saying, okay, let's think about what we think the dividends will be into the future and see if we can present value that stream to the current day. And then we'll present value basically what we believe the value of the stock will be to the current day. So in our information, we got the dividends last year, we're assuming were the $8. The growth rate is expected to be 6%. So we're saying that they're going to increase by the 6%. We expect the dividends to grow at the 6%. The required rate of return, we're going to say, is 15%. The discount rate also 15%. So one way we can kind of think about the value is to say, hey, let's project out in some point into the future the amount that we think we're going to get from the stream of dividends, then present value those, and then present value the stock price that we believe will be at that endpoint as well. Let's first do that method. So we're going to imagine 4 years out in the future. We're just going to say, let's pick this out 4 years out into the future. First thinking about what the stream of dividends will be for that time period, assuming $8 dividends now and 6% growth rate. So we're going to say, all right, the next year, we expect then the $8 dividend to be times the growth rate of 6%. So you can multiply times 6% plus the $8 or 106%. In other words, 100% plus the 6%, which would be 106%. Let's put some brackets around that. I'm going to put brackets here. So there we have it. In other words, just to clarify that, and then you can add some decimals numbers, add some decimals if needed, just to clarify that. If we had $8 and then we had the 6%, 0.06, and then we added some decimals here, we would then have then the 8 times the 6%, and that would give us our increase. If we were to add decimals, and then if I add that to the original 8 plus that number, we then add some decimals here, we get to our 8.48 about. Other way we can get there is, of course, the $8 and then add this together. This would be 1.06, 100% plus the 6%, percentifying that, and that will get us right there then. The $8 times that will get us directly there. So that's what we're doing here. We do need the brackets because of the order of operations, and I want to pull the 6% from there, so I don't want to just hard code 106%, so that if I was working scenarios, I can then pull this from my data set in Excel, and that's the just general practice we want to have. All right, so now we're going to take the prior number for the second year. It's going to increase by another 6%. So I'm going to put then this is going to be times brackets, then the 6 plus 1, or 106%, closing the brackets up there, adding a couple decimals to that one. Let's do it again. This is going to be the prior number times, I'm going to say 1 plus the 6% again, and then add some decimals there. Now note, what I would like to do is be able to copy this down. So let's think about how we could autofill. I'm going to actually delete these two, and then think about how we could just use the autofill to do this. Let's delete this last one. And then I'll use autofill. So this cell represents the cell above it, which we do want to copy down. The one we don't typically want to copy down is usually the thing that's outside the table. In this case, that being the B6 here. So B6, we want that to stay constant. So I'm going to put my cursor in B6, select F4 on the keyboard, $ before the B and 6, enter. Then we should be able to autofill that down, grabbing the fill handle, dragging it down to the 4 years, ending off at the 1010. So if I then underline this, font group underline, and sum this up, we have the sum of these items. They're 37, adding a couple pennies, we're looking $37.10. Now, this is going out into the future, so really I got to present value this back to the current point. So I'm going to use the 15% down here to present value this back to the current day so we can use it for our valuation purposes. So we'll use our present value of 1. Notice how easy this is to do basically in Excel as we project out into the future and use the present value functions within Excel because we can autofill once again. So negative present value, shift 9. We're going to then be picking up the rate, which is going to be the 15% here, comma, with the number of periods. Now, we're going to have to hard code the periods because I don't have anything on the periods. You might want to actually number the periods this way in your table. Let me get out of here first. I'll delete this. You could actually say, if I want the periods listed to make the autofill easier, 1, 2, for example, add another column here, and then basically autofill that on down, so that you can then see the periods in a cell reference, and then you can basically refer to those periods, and that could make your autofill a little bit easier. So we could say, once again, negative present value, shift 9. The rate would be the 15%, comma, number of periods. I'm going to then pick up that 1 now, and then comma, because it's present value of 1. We're going to pick that 848, bringing it back to the present value, which would be, if we add some decimals, about 7.37. Continuing this process, we do the negative to make it a positive number, present value, shift 9, rate, once again at the 15%, comma, number of periods, I'm just going to pick up that 2 now, comma, and then no payment, future value is that 8.99, bringing that back to the current point, adding some decimals in the number group. Then one more time, I'm going to say negative present value, shift 9, rate is going to be that 15%, comma, number of periods now 3, comma, and the value is going to be that E5 or that 9.53, adding some decimals there, so we're present value each one of them. Now let's go ahead and use the autofill to copy this down, because this is a common thing that we can autofill down. This is much easier to do in Excel than mathematically if we're doing it by hand. Double click on this first item, the thing that's outside the cell, that 15 once again, because that's outside in our data. We want to make that absolute because we don't want it moving down. I'm going to select F4 on the keyboard. Notice how us using this number series here helps us to basically copy this down a little bit easier. It would be more difficult for us to use the autofill if I had hard-coded 1, 2, 3, and so forth here. And then I can go ahead and autofill that down, autofill it down, double check that it does what we want it to do. Click in the last one, for example, it picked up the 4, the 15 stayed the same. So it looks like it's doing what we want. The outcome is what we would kind of expect to be the case. Underlining this, summing this up then, if we take the sum of these items, we're saying this 26.21 is about the present value of 4 years out of the stream that we expect in terms of the dividends. So now let's think about the other side of things, the price of the stock at the end of 2000 X4 at the end. So there's two components here. There's the dividend component and then the growth of the stock. So taking that into consideration, let's first think about the estimated dividend. If we're at the end of 2000 X4, we're looking at the dividend that's going to be happening there on the return at a year later, which we're going to look at 2000 X5. So I got to pull this basically series out one more step to the next step out, which would be the same kind of process. I'm going to take this 10.10, multiply that. Let's add some decimals, numbers, adding some decimals, and then we're going to pick that 6% plus 1 again, 1.6%, make that a percent. So we're basically pulling this table out to the next point here. Underlining, that would be Home tab, font, and underlining. I'm going to bring this out to the outer column. So as of the end of 2000 X4, we have the 10% times the 106 expected dividend, adding some decimals at the 11 or the 10.71. So then we're going to have the required rate of return that we want to get to, and that's going to be that 15% required rate of return. go into the numbers group, making that a percent. We're going to assume the estimated growth rate the same as the dividends. The dividends going up, the growth rate we're assuming same here. So we're going to say that's going to be the 6% growth rate. Number group, percentifying. Going to go to the font group, underline that. Then we're going to subtract this out. So of the required rate of return, 6% is going to be in the estimated growth. So I'm going to go then to the font group and underline, and we'll go to the numbers, make that a percent, add a couple decimals on it. So now we're going to be then comparing the 10.71 and the rate of growth that is remaining, the 9%, to figure the price. I'm going to take the 10.71 divided by the 9%. We get 119, adding a couple decimals, we're looking 118.95. And you can kind of verify this if you mind, if you want to kind of work it out again over here, just to kind of verify this calculation. You could say, okay, if the price is going to be that 118.95, if that's going to be the price, I'm going to add some decimals, and we want a rate of return. The required rate of return is going to be then the 15%. So percentifying that, then underlining here, we want the 118.95 times the 15%, adding a couple decimals. So we would think that we're looking for a return of that 17.84, and we think that part of the return that we're going to get is the dividend, which is going to be that 10.71. So the 10.71, which we calculated up here, so the return on the dividends is going to be that 10.71, and then we've got on the value of the stocks, the estimated growth of the stock, so I'll say growth, and that's going to be then the 118 that we're investing, 118.95, and times that 6%, adding some decimals to these two so they kind of line up here, and then adding those up. If we sum these up, equals the sum, and add a couple decimals, numbers, adding some decimals here, we get back to that 17%, just so you can kind of match this out, make some sense of these calculations front. Sometimes it works, it's helpful to work them both ways. So then the present value of the stock price, if we want to present value this, we're thinking this is going to be the price out at the end of 2000 x4. Let's bring it back to the current time period then. I'm going to say negative present value, shift 9. The rate is going to be, we're going to pick up the rate is the 15%. We're going to say comma, number of periods, I'm going to say 4 because it's 4 periods out. And then comma, the payment that we're going to have is going to be then comma, no payment because we're looking present value of 1. And then we're picking up that 118.95, the price. That's going to be the 68.1. So now we've present valued the price 4 years out, and we've present valued a stream of payments, which are going to be the dividends, not an annuity because they're different. We had to present value all of them. We got the 26.21 and the 68.01. So if we add those up then and calculate the current value of the current value of the stock, we would say, all right, the value of the dividends that we present valued were the 26.21, and the present value here of the stock price is the 68.01, and we'll add some decimals to these, adding a couple decimals, underlining font group and underline, and then sum them up equals the SUM. Adding those up, adding a couple decimals here, we get to the 94.22. So 94.22. So you can see how conceptually that kind of makes sense, right? We're going to say, okay, let's kind of project out into the future, what the dividends will be, present value them, that revenue stream, and then see what the price will be into the future, and pick that up and present value those two items to figure out, to think about what the current value would be. Then the other calculation we can do, we've worked on, is going to be the method 2, which will come typically to a similar kind of calculation, which is what we're kind of proving or showing here. So we're going to say, as of the current period, let's estimate the dividend is going out at the end of X0. The next dividend is going to be on 2000 X1. So I'm going to say, all right, next dividend now is going to be the 848. And let's add some decimals there. We're going to say numbers, add a couple decimals. And then we got the required return, once again, which is at 15%. So 15% is the required return, making that numbers group percentifying it. And then the estimated growth, we're going to say once again, is the 6% that we're estimating here. And so I'm going to say the numbers group percentify, home tab, font, and underline. We subtract those two out, we get the 15 minus the 6 then, and we go to the numbers group, add some decimal. Actually, let's make it a percent. Percentifying it, and then font group and underlining it. So then we got our 15% required rate of return, the estimated growth rate 6% here. Therefore, we have the 9% left after the estimated growth. We're going to compare that then to the dividend to figure out the value, which is going to be the 8.48 divided by the 9, which gives us, if I add a couple pennies, about the same answer. So you can see how this method, of course, is a simple, shorter method to kind of get there. This method kind of makes more sense, like intuitively, if you're trying to project out into the future where you will be, and then present value them. So this one might give you a better kind of understanding or a more confident feel to it, or as you project out. But then you can estimate it basically using this method as well, and oftentimes getting to the same answer or close to the same answers.